All right, hello. This is going to be my live stream about creating Utopia. And I ran for, those of you who don't know, I ran for Congress, or I attempted to run for Congress. I didn't actually get on the ballot. There was a little snafu there. And I was a little naive thinking that when I was going to run for Congress, I was just going to, as soon as I announced that people who were going to cover my campaign in the media were going to see that, hey, this guy's got a different platform. It's not standard Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, or Green. We're going to cover it and take a look at it. And I couldn't have been more wrong about that and couldn't have been more naive on what happened to, hello, hi, Mom. I couldn't have been more naive on to what was going to be required in order to move forward with this cooperative economy. And once I realized that I put this platform out and no one was biting, I thought that maybe if I could just get a few people in the local media to cover it, and once they understood it, then they would start promoting me, and then I wouldn't have to do a whole lot, and then I'd win my election and all that stuff, and it would be easy. And none of that happened either. And then the more I pushed, the more I realized that a lot of people, they would get the concept of cooperation, but they didn't quite put all the pieces together. And I didn't do a good enough job explaining all the pieces such that they could take it and run with it. And so that's kind of where I'm at now. And the part that needs to happen is that a movement needs to be created around this concept of cooperation. And it has to become almost like a trendy thing. But in order to get to that point, people have to understand it, and in order to get people to understand it, I'm going to obviously have to do a better job explaining it. And the closest I've gotten was, there's one guy when I went to a libertarian convention, the closest I got, there was a guy who, we had to go back and forth for like a good 20 minutes, and he says, no, you're wrong here. And then I said, no, here's how I view this. And then finally at the end, he's like, wait a minute, why aren't we all doing this? And I was like, cool, someone will get it. This is early on in my campaign. I'm like, someone will get it. Once the snowball goes, then it'll be easy for me. And that wasn't the case. And a lot of people, they get it, but they don't quite get how it's going to work out for them in the long run. And I explained in the beginning, and like, yeah, I like cooperation, I like sharing and not having to worry about intellectual property and stuff with the courts, but it still doesn't translate long term. And the more I argue with people and debate with people, the more I find that there are some deep-seated reasons why people think this isn't going to work. And a lot of people think it comes down to human nature. And that was a real interesting one for me. Like, quite a few people have now, when push comes to shove, and we keep discussing it, and they say, well, it's human nature, we need to be ruled, and it's human nature to be greedy. And I fundamentally disagree with that. I think it's human nature to be greedy when our needs aren't met. And there's a huge difference between that, because our needs can get met, and it's just that the world we live in isn't really doing a good job. So, what do I consider utopia? In one word, it's freedom, and I don't mean that in like a buzzword like freedom, guns and stuff. I really mean it in a pure sense. Like we as human beings need to be free, and that includes physical freedom. That's obvious. I don't want a whole lot of people in jail, and you should be able to move about however you want. Mental freedom, a lot of this, the next few are going to have to do with judgment. You should be able to think the way you want. You should be able to think what you want. You shouldn't have to worry about other people's judgments so much. And I think that will create a more diverse set of opinion and a better end result, a better species, a better us. So there's the physical freedom, the mental freedom, emotional freedom. It's kind of similar to the mental freedom, but the emotional side, we should be able to be free to feel what we want. That one gets a little more difficult. Spiritual and societal. So spiritual freedom, that one's more or less obvious. We should be able to worship how we want. But I'd like to take that to another level. I want it just not so that people are free to worship how they want. I would like it where people were exploring their spirituality openly and without judgment, because I think there's a lot there. And for a guy who's been technical his whole life, I spent 2 decades working in the software industry. I was very left-brain, very methodical. And I met someone special, and she opened up to an emotional side of me. And now there's a third side, a spiritual side. As a guy who was an atheist for 42 years, now I feel like my spiritual side is kind of growing larger than my logical and emotional side. And I think it would be great if we could all talk about that kind of thing publicly and openly. And that's difficult to do with our current environment. And societal freedom, this really goes to, like, how much control do we the people have over the world we live in? We generally, like, if we want to build more roads, is that actually within our power? I mean, we petition someone. What if we want world peace? Is that really in our power? So in general, if you don't have a lot of money and influence over people, you are not going to have a freedom in this society, which I would like people to have. And at the core of this freedom, because we have to have some social rule regulating, like you can't just say everyone's free to do whatever. It's like there's going to be a bunch of what ifs going on. And I like to generally have the rule of live and let live. If you don't need to bother somebody else, if what they're doing, if you don't need to correct it, don't. Let them be in their space, and they'll let you be in their space. And I think that resolves a lot of issues. So that's what I consider to be a utopia. It's a lot of freedom, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and societal. And as the guiding principle, it is a live and let live. So the solution, I'm sure most of you know what I think about that. It is the cooperative economy. In short, that is open source philosophy marries small business. And I'm going to give an example about that, so I'm not going to go too much into it there. But the magic part about the open sourcing is that it removes so much overhead into what private for-profit companies have to do. When everyone has a starting point of we see what the current best practices for growing food or doing health and stuff like that. Let me turn that off. When you have that base, then you don't have to start from scratch, and you don't have to always go to a corporation to get your needs in life met. So this intellectual property, this open sourcing, allows people to have all this information all at once, the worldwide best practice, and it completely gets rid of all of this nonsense where corporations like Apple and Samsung have been suing each other and wasting a lot of taxpayer money in the court system, and Microsoft and Google and all this crap. And that's all because so-and-so thinks they came up with it first and someone else copied it, and that's best case. Odds are they're also doing it just to drain the other person's money. Lawyers make a lot of money, and it's like there's too much incentive for corruption in that system. Not to mention everyone is reinventing the wheel in-house because they want to keep whatever they've learned to themselves. Otherwise, you give it to your competitor. So that's one of the that's the biggest thing about the cooperative economy. That's a big shift. That it's effectively libertarian, what the libertarians are advocating, but with the open source philosophy mixed in, and that kind of makes it work. So what is preventing this is, honestly, it's understanding. People don't understand how their lives and their community can be worlds better. And enough people believe that they can still solve the problem through voting and government, and enough people believe they can still, if worse comes to worse, they can start a business and they can get a job. So what's going to happen is eventually someone who's on board with this concept of cooperation and has enough influence is going to encourage people to start doing this, or things are going to get bad enough where people are going to start to look around for other alternatives. Because people don't generally roll over and die when things get bad. They may fight each other, but they're also going to try and solve problems. And I think if things get bad with our government, as I don't know, it's like you would think that the Democrats, if you believe what they say, would do something with healthcare now that they are out of power. Like they would be advocating for something, but all they have going is anti-Trump and abolish ICE. Okay, maybe if you want to abolish ICE, but maybe we need a little plan, and it shouldn't have been so sudden and knee-jerk reaction. So I'm not seeing anything from the Democrats that give me hope, and I don't really need to rip on Republicans because pretty much everyone knows how I feel about them. All right, so transitioning to a cooperative economy. And this is the part that I've been struggling to get people to understand. So if I don't get it this time, my bad, I guess there'll be a next time. But one major piece, there's a concept of compound interest. And you don't need to know the exponential growth and all that stuff, but know that when you invest something in, like a bank account or whatever, it's going to be a long time before you personally get something out of that. You invested in there, you have that money, and then you get some interest, but you don't really notice the benefit. But really who gets that benefit is your kids, assuming, you know, taxes and all that, leaving that out. But later on down, that concept of compound interest and investing in yourself and you getting those dividends back, that's key. Because in a cooperative economy, we are all investing in our community. And we're not trying to make money, we're not trying to get rich. You can make money while you're doing this, you can get paid for your services, but the goal is to make your community better. And when you share how you've done it, you help other people who have that same goal. So this compound interest concept, when you start with a cooperative economy, you may not get that much back in your investment. But over time, especially your kids and the future generations, aren't going to have to worry about jobs and GDP and Trump and all that, because they will have their food and they will have their health and they will have their connection to the internet and all that, the basics of life that they should have, and they won't have to work their ass off in capitalism to get it. And that's really the whole point. So compound interest, once you invest in your community, over time it will return more and more dividends. And that's at the core of the cooperative economy. So we start now, and we start this investment in our communities, and just a couple years down the road, those dividends will start to pay off. So as an example for how this can work, think about a community of, say, 100 houses in your little local neighborhood. What I would advocate is that someone goes around and finds a few other people in that community, the more the merrier, who want to grow food. And they find the best practice for how people are growing food in that climate and that what's easy to grow and that temperature and that time and all that stuff. And then they grow food for the people who are participating. And unlike capitalism, where you're trying to produce scarcity. It's like you're trying to generate this ton of demand, but you always want to produce just underneath it because that will maximize your profit. Well, the cooperative economy is the exact opposite. If you're growing food for your community, you don't want to say, well, here's how much 5 houses will need, so we're going to just under the, you're like, well, here's what 5 houses need, let's grow for 15. Because once you've already started growing stuff, it's not that much harder to grow more. And then what do you do with the surplus of that? Well, you're probably going to give it to your neighbors, or maybe give it to the homeless, or maybe you sell it or something like that. But the point is that you will eventually achieve best practice for growing all those individual items in your community, and you will have a surplus. And those people participating in this project will never go hungry again, because just by participating in a little bit, growing food in a community, they will have a sustainable food supply. And what I would imagine happens, maybe there's only a few houses that participated first, but then when you start giving food away, people are like, well, that seems successful. Maybe I want to participate. Maybe I want to help out. Maybe I want to join. And the project grows. Maybe you grow to 5, 10, 15 houses. And before long, you have that community of 100 houses all with food. And the more people who want to participate in it, the more you don't need them to help out with food. So maybe the people who are growing food can start handing things off. Well, if you want my food for free, which is great, we're giving it away, you can volunteer, and that will free me up to do something else, some other project. And it's really whatever projects your community needs. And I recommend that we do food because food and water are basics of life, and I don't trust government and capitalism to give us clean food and water. So, but whatever service your community needs, focus on getting that there in an open source fashion and helping the people around you learn how to do that. Unlike in capitalism, in your job, when you get good at your job, then you go up to your manager and you say, well, I need more work now, or maybe you slack off and do nothing. But in the cooperative economy, once you figure out how to grow your food more efficiently, that's more free time for you with the same result. So that's like that compound interest. You are investing in your community, and you and your community are getting the benefits. And I like to, food health is food is a prime one. Obviously we need to eat, and I think we need to eat clean food. And I would like to eat food that's not tortured. I like to eat food that's healthy. And when you're growing your own food that way, you're not going to put pesticides because that's more efficient, because you're eating it. Whereas now in our system, if you don't like what Monsanto's doing, you have to petition the Democrats or the Republicans and hope they're going to listen to you, and then eventually you're going to vote Nancy Pelosi out, and then all of a sudden she's going to, stand up to Monsanto, or Hillary Clinton's going to stand up to Monsanto, or something like that. So that system's really absurd. It's not going to work, or it's clearly not working. So while your community's getting food off the ground, you're going to establish, like, we have a muscle memory. And when you throw a ball the first time, like you see a kid throw the ball and they're awkward as hell, and it's like they have absolutely no coordination. But once you get better at throwing the ball, you don't have to think about it so much. It just becomes a natural motion. You throw the ball. Cooperation, this community cooperation is going to be a lot like that. There's going to be this structural muscle memory for how to cooperate. And the first time you do it, that's the hard part. That's the awkward part, finding that first 5 houses. But then as you move beyond, and all of a sudden food is working, you're like, wow, we have food security in my local community. I think a lot of people would appreciate that. Then you can start to say, well, what next? What does my community need next? And I think health is the obvious choice, because in general, we're not healthy. We have sick care and not health care. We're not trying to make people healthy. It's almost like a maintenance. And I think I don't think we're going to build local hospitals in a small community, but you can have health clinics, and you can provide health services, and just even do things that would make your community healthier. That might even be super low cost, like organized community walks or something like that. And as cheesy as that sounds, but if that's one of the things that the people who are growing food say that would help them, because if your goal is to have a happier, healthier community, organizing walks might build community, might build team, might help that institutional cooperation muscle memory that I was talking about. And all of these things that aren't financially incentivized in capitalism are immediately options in the cooperative economy, and the things that can make it that much better just initially. So that's health. Things like massage, acupuncture, testing, blood work. I think a lot of women's services could be helpful. I think their energy. So after health, there's again, you get where I'm going. It's like whatever your community needs, whatever they want, whatever people have available, that's what people should start contributing to their community. And there's home services, transportation, like people watching kids. School's an obvious one. Like people, if you're growing a surplus of food, maybe they would appreciate you teaching their kid or taking their kid out to a community sporting event where all the kids play a sport. Basically building community. Everyone learns how to grow food. Everyone learns how to care for each other. Everyone learns how to cooperate, and everyone learns how to be with each other. And as your community grows, and as that investment pays dividends to your community, as a result, and you will get more free time because you're no longer having to build this stuff up. Then you will start to add services like maybe you want lightning fast internet, or maybe you want free transportation within your community based on an electric grid that they build up. Schools, you could have sharing kids' toys so people don't have to buy a ton of toys at Christmas, but you have, like if your community was organized a little bit in a circle, you could have some central area, and a lot of apartment complexes have this, central area where kids share toys so they don't have to buy toys every season then fight over them. It could be like a rotation thing. I mean, there's just tons of different ways that people can cooperate and share, and they don't have to spend as much effort in capitalism to get it. Let's see where Dividends. A friend of mine asked, I think it was last week, what would a teacher's salary be in this new cooperative economy? And it's a really difficult question to answer because as you can see from my example here, there's not necessarily a salary involved. There could be. The people who are growing food could be selling it to other communities, and then they could pay the teachers. Or they could pay the teachers in food, and the people in health can pay the teachers in health, and they all share a network credit, or maybe they exchange dollars. It's all up to them. It's all voluntary. And so what would a community pay a teacher? Well, it depends on how well the community values teaching. And we don't have to worry about the supply and demand of capitalism, because when you are building up your community, how much do you value food? How much do you value energy and health and teaching? And these things are fundamental to building a happy and healthy community. So my answer is I think that the status of everyone will improve in a fully developed cooperative economy. And it's not, I can't give a dollar sign value to what a teacher would get paid. Because I think that once a cooperative economy is in full swing, maybe 5-6 years, people are going to have like community credits or a community digital cryptocurrency, something like that. And I think it will be allocated each month or however the community wants to do it, and they will have leftover credits because the community is producing a surplus of everything. And that's when it gets really interesting, because if your community is producing a surplus of energy, maybe a surplus of water, surplus of food, then you can start exporting things. And that's when you can start, the value of your community rises as relates to other communities around when you're exporting and you're producing more than you need. But the critical piece here is that your communities are becoming self-sufficient and independent. And the biggest reason for this is that I don't trust government anymore. And I'm a progressive, and I know that government was always supposed to be the solution, because as a progressive, I don't trust capitalism. I know for a fact that pull yourself up by your bootstraps in capitalism doesn't work. There are too many homeless vets on the street. I see them all the time when I walk around out here. That is the result of people fighting over the basics. Capitalism encourages humanity to be greedy as opposed to encouraging us to cooperate. And I have no problems with competition. I love competition, but I don't think we should be competing for the basics of life. I think we should be cooperating for that. And I think you can even extend that further. We don't have to even be competing for how to provide the best internet for our community, or competing for how we provide the best health. All of these can be done in cooperation, and we can leave the competition to something else that doesn't require, that our lives aren't going to be at stake for it. So that self-sufficiency and independence from capitalism and government is critical in my eyes, so that you no longer have to spend all this time worrying about whether your political party is going to take power, whether or not you have to canvass for a bunch of politicians, where you have to pay attention to all these lies that the politicians are telling us, whichever side you believe is lying. All of that effort can be spent building your community up and making it such that you are investing in your community so that your kids and our kids' kids can benefit from that compound interest, benefit from that investment that we are putting in today. So the next steps are, unfortunately, the hard part is a movement has to be created. And as I mentioned earlier, it's a matter of convincing someone with a lot more influence than I have, or gaining influence, or waiting till some event happens in the world where people are going to be hungry and looking for solutions, or people have lost faith in government and they're saying, now what? Now what's going on? I don't have the FDA to tell Monsanto to stop spreading Roundup on the wheat that we eat. What's going to happen now when the FDA can't protect us? Or what happens if we lose trust in the FBI or the DOJ? Because they're doing a lot of shady things, or at least they're not answering questions. And I think it becomes important that we don't continue to rely on oil and energy and clean water from institutions that have shown that they don't care about us. And that's what it comes down to. That is government and capitalism. They are both serving a purpose, and it's not to make our lives better. And when there are enough jobs going around, then we can afford iPhones and things are okay. But capitalism eventually runs out of wealth to steal. And eventually the public has too much debt, there's too much student loans, there's too much credit card debt, the Pentagon keeps losing money, and all of a sudden we have to develop a space force. So there's a priority that's off, and it's not to make our communities self-sufficient and independent. And I think we can look at what's going on in Flint, and it's pretty clear that no matter what we say, no matter what we do, they're not coming to help us. So we need to sit with that, and we need to be okay with that. And I think that's when cooperating with your neighborhood, building up a network, becomes a lot more attractive. It's scary now, it's weird now, going out, hey neighbor, I want to start a new cooperative economy. I can't really explain it, but we got to start. You know, that's a difficult step. So that's where the movement is. That's where we are now. A movement has to be created where we are openly and actively accepting the pitfalls of capitalism and government. So progressives need to accept that government is too corrupt to solve the problems, and conservatives need to accept that capitalism is too heartless to care about our families. And once each side has swallowed their pride a little bit and accepted that they're right on one aspect politically and wrong on another aspect politically, we'll be ready to come together and start cooperating. But it's going to take someone with a lot of influence, or it's going to be an event. And I'm hoping it's the former, and I'm hoping people wake up and they start making more conscious decisions, as opposed to saying, well, I'll just vote and that's going to solve, and we'll wait for Bernie, or we're going to wait for Trump and build the wall. And it's like, maybe Trump is going to help us. I wouldn't want to bet the farm on it. So that's where we're at. So we need to create a movement. We also need to start in our communities. That can't be understated. Learning, even if it's just you and a neighbor, you and a friend, learning how to grow some food, learning how to cooperate, creating that structural muscle memory so that when you do have to cooperate, then you will be ready to hit the ground running a little faster. And it's when you think about how much effort it would take to grow food in your community, and how much effort it would take to produce energy in your community, or produce a health institution in your community. It's not that much compared to how much effort we're exuding trying to get politicians in office. It's not that much effort we're taking fighting each other about Democrat and Republican and Trump and Hillary and all that stuff. So if we take a step back and really think about what we're doing, I think just a slight adjustment in priorities, we can make the world quite a bit better place. And it starts with our own communities. And that is the kind of freedom that I want for all of us: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and societal. And I think the cooperative economy is the way we're going to get there. All right, thank you everybody. I like doing these live streams. Thanks for those who watch live, and I will see you all on the interwebs.